Hello and welcome to Newscentre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. India and Russia are all set to bolster economic ties as President Putin arrives in New Delhi on a state visit tomorrow. This will be Putin's first official visit to India since the war in Ukraine began in February 2022. The two-day visit is scheduled to begin with a private dinner on Thursday at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's residence. The leaders are likely to discuss a free trade agreement which will be signed in the future. So what does New Delhi want from Moscow? First on the agenda is boosting exports of pharmaceuticals, agriculture, textile products to Russia. India is also looking for stable fertilizer supply from Russia, along with higher exports. The two nations are also likely to sign an MOU on migration to enable mobility of skilled workers and boosting connectivity. Non-tariff barriers, regulatory impediments, defense co-development and export of defense equipment are also likely to be discussed during the meeting between the two leaders. Remember, trade between India and Russia stood at $69 billion in FY25, with India importing $64 billion worth of goods and services. Let me go across to our special guest right now. Brahma, strategic affairs expert, joins us right now. Brahma, what do you think is going to be the big focus of Putin? Yes, they're coming with an idea to pitch the Su-57 to India, but we believe there is going to be no headway on the fifth-generation fighter jet deal, no major defense agreements, but India would like continuity of the partnership and maybe have a discussion, an agreement on bridging the trade deficit. What do you think would be the best outcome for both sides?
In an increasingly polarized world, Putin's visit to New Delhi carries outsized geopolitical significance. It's not the agreements that will emerge from the visit. The deliverables are not that important. What's important is the symbolic element, the fact that Putin, for the first time since the Ukraine war, is visiting India. And his visit lays bare another important reality, which is a steady deterioration of US-India relations. And that deterioration has pushed India to re-embrace Russia as a reliable long-term partner whose strategic value cannot simply be dismissed because it unsettles Washington. And for Putin, this visit to India is very critical because it demonstrates Russia has options beyond China. After all, we should not forget that India has watched with growing dismay as Western policy has driven Russia closer to China. Yet, Putin's visit underscores that Russia still has options beyond China and will not allow itself to be reduced to a junior partner to Beijing. And for India, there's also important geopolitical signaling involved, which is that at a time when the US under Trump is treating India very badly, India is messaging to Washington that it will not look at the world through a simplistic Western versus anti-Western binary, that it will make its own strategic choices and will preserve its strategic autonomy. So in the totality of things, Putin's visit is very important.
Right. Let me also get an Ambassador Sibal at this point. Ambassador Sibal, do you think Putin will allow greater exports of Indian goods, pharmaceuticals, textiles, shrimp products to Russia? Will he open up the market for Indian goods?
I think they want to. They have already said that they will want to increase the trade volumes between India and Russia, and that the Russian market will be available to them. And they have in mind the kind of difficulties we are facing with regard to exports to the United States because of the sanctions that have been tariffs that have been imposed on us. They are conscious of that, and they want to take the full benefit of that opportunity to signal to India that if the US market is now restricted for us, they can open up the Russian market more. And this is in the area of pharmaceuticals and textiles and agricultural products, IT products, and things like that. Now, this also means that their regulatory and registration processes, non-tariff barriers, all that has to be modified. Plus, of course, the potential of an FTA with the Eurasian Economic Union would help matters. But this is not something which is going to happen immediately. There is a work in progress. Discussions will need to take place and it will take time. But the inclination is there, desire is there, the political commitment seems to be there on the part of Russia. Because they understand that if you want to raise the volume of trade to $100 billion by 2030, which Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, has reiterated, will require a major effort on Russia's part. You see, from our side, we can buy more from Russia. We can buy more fertilizers, we can buy more coking coal, we can buy more raw material, we can buy more LNG. But this will keep increasing the trade deficit between India and Russia. Our trade to Russia is only $5.6 billion. It is nothing at all. So they understand that. But I think despite that, it'll take a little time before we can substantially increase our exports to Russia.
Right.
See, the problem.
Brahma, Chellaney, I'd like to ask you about I'll come back to you, sir, about the importance of the discussions on an FTA between India and the Russia-led Eurasian Economic Union. Is this going to be beneficial for India?
India has been either signing or negotiating FTAs, even though the Indian government under Prime Minister Modi made it clear just a year ago that the FTAs that India has signed so far, for example, with Southeast Asia, with the ASEAN countries, with Japan, with South Korea, they have actually not benefited Indian economy because India is not an export-driven economy. India imports far more than it actually exports because India relies largely on domestic consumption for its economic growth. And yet, ironically, the Modi government has been signing or negotiating FTAs, including with, for example, the EU. We signed one with Britain fairly recently. We're negotiating one with Canada, for example. So FTA, again, of whether it's with one region or group or with one country, the question is, how does any FTA benefit an economy that is import-dependent, which relies on domestic consumption for its growth? Of course, FTAs are very important in a geopolitical context and geoeconomic context because they symbolize the convergence of larger strategic interests. But beyond that, in terms of concrete benefits for the Indian economy, there hasn't been any debate in India. I think in the case of Putin's visit, given the fact that now Russia has pivoted to a war economy, earlier there was disruption in supply of military hardware to India because of the Ukraine war. Russia was trying to meet its own defense requirements, but now it has recalibrated and rebuilt its armament industry to such an extent that, as the Americans are now openly acknowledging, Russia is producing more missiles today than it can fire. In other words, it's building a large inventory of long-range missiles. And I think on the military side, on the defense side, there might be important possible deals in the works. Maybe there may be no announcement during Putin's visit, but certainly there's some very important deals that India is seeking, including India wants 5 additional squadrons of S-400 air defense systems. There's going to be discussion on a host of other things. These are ongoing discussions.
Absolutely.
But I think,
Mr. Chellaney, let me take that forward with Ambassador Sibal. Ambassador Sibal, we're not expecting any big-ticket defense deals, but yes, there will be a logistics agreement whereby the militaries of the two countries will be able to access each other's bases. This agreement was signed earlier. It's now been ratified by the Russian parliament, so to say. Having said that, when do you think India would be able to bite the bullet when it comes to acquiring the fifth-generation fighter jet, either from the US or Russia? It's a very difficult choice. Sources tell us that India will not give any indication, or we're literally going to stonewall any kind of discussions on the Su-57 right now. But when do you think India will be ready to take a decision?
Well, if you ask my opinion, we should not at all go in for an American fifth-generation fighter with F-35s. I don't think we should do that. It'll be foolish strategically to do so, given the vagaries of U.S. foreign policy and the punishment that we get at U.S. hands every now and then, which is unprovoked. So you can't rely on the United States because they can weaponize their dependence, our dependence on them. However, with regard to acquiring a fifth-generation fighter, we have also another issue we have to deal with, and that is our self-reliance, our AMCA project. Will that then go into hibernation if we go in for Su-57? Can we wait for AMCA or the later versions of LCA to fill in our needs while we develop our indigenous capacities? To that end, whether we can buy more Rafales to boost our air power, all these things will have to be considered. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's not a choice between United States and Russia. It's a choice between self-reliance, the French connection, and the Russian connection. And I think government will have to take a view on that.
Okay, Brahma, Chellaney, the Russian government spokesperson, the Russian president's spokesperson said that they want to offer a no-limits partnership to India. What does that really mean? And in the face of US tariffs and trade tensions with the American president, are we likely to accept any such partnership? Do you expect India to announce such a no-limit partnership with the Russian government?
Well, the phrase "no limits" is being used in the context of China-Russia partnership. So we can't be importing the same terminology in the Russia-India context. And certainly the Russia-India partnership is a long-standing partnership that dates back to 1971. It's the longest partnership that has remained very stable and reliable for 55 years or so. I don't think there's any other bilateral partnership in the world that has been so stable and mutually beneficial for both partners as the partnership between Moscow and New Delhi. And I think the history of it and the fact that that the two countries still value it very much is by itself a good advertisement of the importance that both countries acknowledge in continuing this partnership. So it doesn't require any terminology, any kind of phrase to describe it. The partnership speaks for itself.
That's important. Let me go across to Kanwal Sibal, Ambassador Sibal, for the one final question. Ambassador Sibal, both sides are likely to sign an MOU on migration and mobility of skilled professionals. How important is this? And I'd like to ask you, from your experience as India's ambassador to Russia, a lot has happened in the relationship since then. This year, we've also seen a disturbing trend of Indians going to Russia, joining positions in the Russian army, somehow landing up with jobs they don't really want to.
Before I answer that question, I want to say something about this no limits partnership. You know, there has been concern in India that Russia has become very close to China. They have no limits partnership, so Russia will no longer be a reliable partner. It will be influenced in its relations with India by China. So what the Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, meant by saying that offering a no-limits partnership to India was, in fact, to send a political signal that if you are concerned about our no-limits partnership with China, we are willing to have a no-limit partnership with you. We can go as far as you want to go. In other words, indirectly telling us, don't be worried about our relationship with China. We are not linking our relationship with China with our relationship with you. We can raise it to the same level if you so want. So they have opened the door to us. So politically, this is very significant. Now, whether in the background of Brahma, Chellaney rightly said that this phrase of no limits partnership created a huge turmoil in American geopolitical circles, whether we would like to use the same phraseology and raise the same concerns. And then they'll start talking about Russia, India, China coming together and the kind of thing that they visualize in terms of further erosion of Western hegemony. Maybe we would not like to use that term officially, but I'm just explaining the background. With regard to the skilled workers, I think context, one, of course, is this H-1B visa stuff. Not that the two are related directly in terms of what the H-1B visa is for, but to say that, look, your skilled workers are being denied openings now in the United States, but we can open doors to you to the extent that it meets the requirements on both sides. We are talking about, you see, we have great strengths in the IT sector. Russia too has strengths. In my time, we tried to develop cooperation, but it didn't succeed because the Russian IT sector is structured very differently. Now I understand that they have restructured it, and maybe there is potential there, and we should explore it to the maximum extent. With regard to other workers, unskilled workers, who are going to Russia, I think they want another 40,000 to come to Russia to work on in construction, on agriculture, or what have you. There is some potential there, but we should have a proper agreement with them so that the thing remains controlled and is subject to monitoring and making sure that this is not misused.
There is a legal route. All right, so we've run out of time, but thank you very much, Brahma, Chellaney and Ambassador Sibal, for joining us on the program for a very comprehensive discussion on President Putin's visit for the annual India-Russia summit. We're taking a short break, but don't go anywhere. We get you